Hello and welcome to Armenian News Network Groong, Week in Review. I'm 𝐊𝐫𝐴. This episode was recorded before Azerbaijani forces started a wide-scale attack against Artsakh and Armenia over the weekend, so we will not cover that important topic today. In this episode, along with Asbet Bedrosyan, we're going to talk about the following major topics: the 29th anniversary of Armenian independence, Armenia's foreign policy, Azerbaijan war of disinformation, and lastly, the opposition trio rally and Tsarukyan's arrest. To talk about these issues, we have with us Asbet Kochikyan, a senior lecturer of political science and international relations at Bentley University in Massachusetts, Marine Manucharyan, no relation, president of Civic Forum NGO. Her areas of focus include Artsakh, the Armenian Armed Forces, national security, and foreign policy. And Emil Sanamyan, a senior research fellow at USC's Institute of Armenian Studies, specializing in the politics of the Caucasus, with a special focus on Azerbaijan.
Hello and welcome everyone.
Hello.
Hello Asbet, hello Marine, hello hovik, hello Emil.
Hello everyone.
Hello.
On Monday, September 21st, Armenia celebrated its 29th anniversary of independence. A very long parade of congratulations rolled in from world leaders, from Russia to America to China, Japan, Canada, Australia, the Arab world, even Saudi Arabia, around Europe and South America, Kazakhstan, and Georgia as well. Many world landmarks were lit up in the colors of the Armenian flag, and Washington, D.C. Mayor Muriel Bowser proclaimed September 21st as Armenian Independence Day in D.C. What does everyone think of this year's celebration? Did we see the Su-30s fly overhead? I can't remember. Emil, do you have any thoughts about this year's celebrations?
I'm not a big celebration guy, not a big independence celebration guy. I just sort of missed it, I have to say. It has to be at least a round number or something. It's like 29 years now. I think we should, I hope we get to the point where, this Independence Days are, not as important. I'm not a big fan of celebrations like that.
Incidentally, it is the 30th anniversary of the Declaration of Independence, so it's a round number for that one. And September 21st was proclaimed a year later from that. So,
I have to say, I because of my maybe critical look at these things, I just look at it more from the context in which these declarations occurred. So even if we look at the First Republic Declaration, basically German attaché suggests to the Georgians to proclaim their independence, or the Germans with the system, and they do, and Armenians are left with no option but to declare their independence on May 28th. And then in the Soviet collapse, this country's collapsing. I mean, you got to declare something. Everybody's declaring things, so they declared. I'm much more, I don't see in those declarations or even that referendum vote anything spectacular or anything really worth celebrating. Certainly the fact that Armenia was able to win in the war is much more of a substantial accomplishment. The fact that the Armenian economy was able to be turned around in consequence of the war and achieve some successes in certain things economically, that's much more of a cause to celebrate. These little declarations, the little texts that were issued at the time, I don't find exciting.
I mean, what do you think about the actual the context of the declaration? For instance, when you look at the Azerbaijan, and I think even Georgia, they draw direct reference to 1918, and they declare sort of their republic as a continuation, I believe, of 1918. Whereas Armenia specifically crafted this declaration and based it on the legal framework of USSR, and so anything do you see there that maybe if there was a different choice 30 years ago in that language, things would have been easier or harder today?
I don't think it made any difference. There was a general sense, say, in the Baltic states, that there was consensus opinion that they were occupied countries. They were captured by the Soviet Union and during World War II, and this period of Soviet dominion was a period of occupation. There was not that consensus in the Caucasus. I think if we look at the Caucasus, Georgia certainly was much more nationalist in that sense than Armenia or Azerbaijan. But even in Georgia, you could think of substantial minority populations that didn't look at Soviet domination period or even Russian domination period as an occupation. They just saw, they looked at it, and substantial portion of the ethnic Georgian population as well. Those moods changed though, but I mean in general, I don't think they had any real impact on these countries. One thing to keep in mind is that Armenia was in a very peculiar position compared to Georgia, Azerbaijan, and all the other former Soviet republics, is that essentially beyond the Soviet Union, it had one big neighbor, Turkey, with which it had a very, very substantial problematic history. So, of course, that informed the way Armenians thought of a Russian military presence or Russian political presence in that region, in the absence of any kind of Western presence or interest. So that, of course, I think had informed early decisions by the Armenian government to try to maintain Russian military presence in Armenia. As if if you recall those days, there was very little interest in Russia in terms of maintaining their military presence anywhere. That certainly informed early decisions that were taken back in 1991, 1992.
It's interesting, actually. I was thinking that the reaction from Emil's side is very much in line with the discussion that was also in the social media this year during the independence celebration, which was about independence. There's like two opinions. One is like, yay, we're independent. The other was like, why you're so happy? The independence just fell on our head with the Soviet Union collapsing. So it's interesting to see that in our little podcast is also the notion is there. But Su-30s were flying. They were beautiful. I love their flights actually over Yerevan for some reason. The fireworks were there. First time this year during pandemic, we even had an online gala concert, which with all the stars out there that were with the current government during the 2018 events. So yeah, but I wouldn't say that because of the pandemic, things are so closed that these festivities were not felt. The streets were not flooded by people and stuff. But even though it was a day to celebrate. But I'm happy that actually it brings and sparkles discussions about, reflection over what independence is for us. And I probably would share the same notion with Emil about the, whether it was gained, deserved, or understood, or actually digested fully as a phenomena for us. So.
Yeah, I mean, without disagreeing with what Emil was saying or what Marish just mentioned as well, yes, granted, there are a lot of cases also in decolonization after 1940s where a lot of countries gained their independence. It just fell on them. That doesn't undermine in any way the fact that countries choose, right, what to celebrate and what to focus on. At the end of the day, again, I feel I share the same sentiments about celebrations and so on, but without forgetting that sort of celebrations like this, parades and so on, they're like panem et circenses, bread and circus kind of a thing that bolsters people's sort of sense of belonging, but also creates a distraction, or nice or otherwise, from the daily life. I think these are symbols. As much as they are symbols, they are also important factors in creating a sense of a country's history, narrative, and so on and so forth. So from that perspective, yes, it's an expected thing, and it's more common in the European tradition. You don't see that in the United States, even though President Trump decided at some point that he wants to have military parades and so on and so forth. But in tune with the Soviet and former Soviet, but also European traditions, the flight of the airplanes as well as the army brigades marching and so on, again, create that sense of celebration, regardless if that celebration was hard earned or it just dropped in their lap.
What was interesting this year is because of the 30th anniversary of the declaration, there was a lot of media coverage from Hawk affiliated sources about how the declaration was drafted, their debates around like whether to include Armenian genocide in it or not. I found those a little bit interesting, and in general, yeah, I think it's important to celebrate things like this, especially for a small country like Armenia. But let's go on. So speaking of congratulations, we heard, so we did get congratulations from Saudi Arabia. Interestingly, we don't have diplomatic relations with them. But one country we didn't hear from initially was our neighbor Iran, and the press immediately went speculating on what was going on. Finally, the congratulations arrived on the 24th, 4 days late, or 3 days late, depending on how you count. The letters were sent to Prime Minister Pashinyan as well as President Sarkisyan. I'm sure the delay was not due to some postal service issues, so there must be a message here, or is there? Marine, what do you think Iran is telling Armenia?
During our last podcast, Aspen also mentioned the interesting thing that things like this with Iran are not just like, mistakes or they've forgotten or it's a, bureaucratic something there, but it's definitely a messages being sent. And that messages are that they're not happy with how the things are going with Armenia. Also, given the fact that the US is trying to impose new sanctions on Iran and forcing other countries to actually line up with these sanctions and cut ties and this and that. So I think with this bigger picture and including Israel getting active in the region and Armenia opening its embassy in Tel Aviv, and also Israel being working very closely with Azerbaijan in the military cooperation sense, all these are signs that are actually can worry Iran, and one could very well understand why they're worried. And however, Armenian government, I think, is not being very careful when it comes to the relations with Iran, because, let's not forget that this is a road to life for us, and it was in 90s, and it was also during the entire independence period of Armenia. And to play this sort of gamble in a way is not a smart way to deal with it.
So what do you think? What do you think was the gamble specifically?
Well, I think it's the way of handling it. I don't mind starting relationships with new countries or starting relationships or opening embassies or, I don't know, playing this new government. It loves to say that, we have this legitimacy from within, we can do whatever we want and, going with this right and left. I don't think that is a smart way to handle it. And the gamble is that they handle things in a way that they manage to anger Iran in a way. So, I think things could have been communicated well, and Iran can understand, obviously, that Armenia has its own independent foreign affairs running. So maybe the handling of the situation wasn't done very, very well, because if it was, we wouldn't have a situation like this. Also, recently, I don't know whether it's an Iranian internal thing, but the goods coming from Iran started getting priced. The last 1 week, we keep hearing that the metal that is coming from there is increasing in price and all sorts of things. And a lot of Armenian traders were doing business with Iran recently, and very cheap stuff was coming to Armenia. Now these opportunities are also getting less and less. So I think the government has things to think about when it comes to the relationship with Iran.
I'll let others comment on this if they want, but also in the general context. So Armenia is also activating its relationship with Egypt and, as we heard, Israel. What do you think about Armenia's foreign policy activity and how active is it really? And are we going to see any major changes long term towards this?
If I can go back to Israel for a moment, we need to keep in mind that over the past 10 years, there's been a major relationship between Azerbaijan and Israel happening. And what has been Iran's response? Iran's response has been to engage with Azerbaijan, to offer military assistance to Azerbaijan, to try to, basically win them over from Israel. So I wouldn't worry about this Iranian reaction that much because, first of all, the point of opening the embassy and being present in Israel is to project Armenia's interest and try to modify Israel's position on weapon sales to Azerbaijan and, in general, the policy towards Armenia. So certainly there's very legitimate reason to be there, and it's a very good idea to have a diplomatic representative there so we could do something about it. And with Iran, Armenia is nowhere near in terms of actions that Azerbaijan engaged in with regard to Iran, in terms of basically being a base for Israeli espionage and almost military presence in Azerbaijan at one point earlier. 5-6 years ago, if we were to believe what the Obama administration was reporting at the time. So, I think that reaching out to Israel, engaging with Israel, can only help get Iran more interested in Armenia rather than the opposite.
I mean, can I just have a small remark there? I mean, I absolutely agree with that, but the thing is that how come the Azeris managed to get the attention from Iran in a support measures way, and the Armenians get the anger message? I think that's what I meant when I say communication is an issue here, because it's not well communicated. I mean, they probably didn't approach Iran properly, or the talks didn't take place. So this is what I'm saying, like.
Iran is a very complex country. Yeah. So it speaks in many voices. And over the years, there have been plenty of Iranian members of parliament, members of government that have made fairly threatening statements about Azerbaijan and have done certain things with regard to Aliyev, etc. But at the same time, there was always the foreign ministry, and there was always the the expediency council with the spiritual leader. They are the ones driving policy. With regard to engaging other countries, so they came around to actually engaging with Azerbaijan rather than sanctioning Azerbaijan in some way. So that's the thing to keep in mind. This little protest at the embassy, or even late congratulations. Yeah, okay, we got the message, but Armenia should continue doing what it's in its interest.
Emil, can Armenia act as a more trusted back channel between Iran and Israel?
Look, I'm not sure if those back channels are all that effective at this point, considering, technology is different than it was, 20, 30 years ago. Every once in a while they do pass messages on back and forth, but it depends on what it is. If it's about particular relations between certain factions in Iran that, maybe they wouldn't want to be seen directly in contact with the U.S. or some other Western country, and a meeting could take place in Armenia or something. But that's about it. I don't think they need intermediaries. They have a very substantial, foreign diplomatic corps.
Aspet, do you have some thoughts about that, I think?
Yeah, I want to situate this within the larger context of Armenia's foreign policy, the more proactive rather than reactive, which seems to have developed after the July war. And Armenian foreign policy took a more active, relatively active, be that reckless or none with not consultation or none. That included active relations with seeking active relations with Greece and Cyprus at one point, which the Turkish media presented it as a triangular or an alliance aimed at Turkey. But when it comes to Egypt, I think to a large extent, one has to keep in mind also the Turkish factor. This might be, again, without much knowledge or without much information, this might be also an attempt to approach the issue as an enemy of my enemy is my friend. Egypt today is in conflict or in tension with Turkey in Libya. And at the same time, I think one of the key components of Armenia's relations with Israel is based on the fact that the close and worrisome relationship between Israel militarily specifically with Azerbaijan. And one has to mention that this is not happening out of nowhere. It's in the last year and a half or since 2018, early 2018. Nalbandian also visited Israel. They've been talking about establishing official diplomatic relations, even though for the last 15 years or so, there have been direct ties between Israel and Armenia, be that in the form of flights, in terms of medical cooperation. I've done some research and I've met with people with this in both countries. The other thing which is important in Israeli-Armenian relation is the Armenian presence in Jerusalem and protecting the rights. So don't forget that in a larger context of things, the Jerusalem Patriarchate is very much in tune in Congress with 𝐀𝐬𝐿𝐴. So there is that connection as well. Armenian government through the church, or the church through the government, is also trying to keep an eye on the interest of Armenians in Jerusalem, Armenian quarter in Jerusalem. So it's a larger aggressive, I wouldn't call it aggressive, but larger proactive foreign policy that includes so many different fronts.
How about if we expand a little bit? I'm more interested in the Gulf Cooperation Council countries. We saw the congratulations from Saudi Arabia, and I think we're talking about more strategic and proactive Armenian foreign policy. But in the context of these recent conflagrations between Turkey and its neighbors, can Armenia gain something here? And specifically, I'm talking about maybe the initiation of diplomatic relations with Saudi Arabia, and how about more activity in neighboring countries?
I think when it comes to the Gulf countries, there have always been relations, especially when it comes to smaller Gulf countries. The Emirates is a prime destination for many Armenians, and vice versa. Be that as also one of the connecting routes, air corridors, connecting air flights, and so on and so forth. And I think the dimension, again, there's a lot to go into to analyze whether or not the Saudi-Iranian sort of confrontation or the rising tension, something Armenia can do. And I think from what I have been following, I feel that warming or thawing relations with the Gulf countries. It seems to be a personal pet project of the president of Armenia, Armen Sarkisyan, who probably through his former personal connections or ties and so on, he's trying to make it a state-to-state relations and trying to work on that front as well. I'm not sure if there's a coordination between the president's office and the foreign ministry, but I have a sense that it's more of an endeavor by the president's office.
Just a remark. You know who is the ambassador of Armenia in Israel? Former ambassador to Russia is Armen Sambatyan. Just I learned it, and it's very curious also to see that a person very close ties with former government, actually very, very close ties, is the point.
Well, I mean, almost all of the diplomatic corps had been in diplomacy for since the old times. But in terms of location of the embassy, I just checked. The only countries that have Jerusalem embassies right now are Guatemala and Trump's America. So it's not a very popular choice.
So is Trump's America a separate country from the rest of America?
We'll see if they keep the
Serbs
embassy there
are
after.
going to relocate there as well.
Because they were told so.
Yep, exactly. That's why I mentioned that it would be nice to see if there's any American push in this Armenian
They're not aware of
embassy.
it, though, right? Like the Serbian president wasn't aware of it, that they were doing it.
He was informed in the Oval Office.
In general, I think we can welcome a more proactive Armenian foreign policy. I wish that is the case. I think that a few months of time frame here is though difficult to use as a measuring stick. So I'm really hoping whoever is doing this is not just a coincidence, but we'll see a more active Armenian, foreign ministry in the future.
One thing I want to add, Hovik, I apologize for coming back to this, but there is always the thought, an afterthought, that from the perspective of many Arab countries, this might be viewed as a non-welcomed sort of move. This is something that in many, many cases, especially during the July war, there was social media postings about why the Palestinians or other Muslim countries are not supporting Azerbaijan or are supporting Azerbaijan and not Armenia and so on. And some of them said, well, Turkey and Azerbaijan have been on our side fighting the Israeli aggression and so on and so forth. So there might be a backlash from some Arab countries, although most of them are, as you said, it's fascinating that Saudi Arabia was not at all fazed with this Armenian opening an embassy in Israel. So that is also something to keep an eye on down the line.
It's a very complex picture.
Okay. Osped, what do we have next?
Well, for the past month, Azerbaijan has upped the war rhetoric and ramped up the fake news machinery to full gear. A constant stream of complaints about Armenian families relocating from Syria and Lebanon to Artsakh is now coupled with fake information that Armenia is relocating 60,000 PKK fighters there. And on Friday, that's yesterday, Azerbaijan had included Asala fighters. Basically, every outlaw group they can think of is being mentioned. I'm surprised they haven't mentioned that Peru's Shining Path or El Chapo are relocating to Karabakh. Emil, there's got to be a reason for all this craziness. What do you think is going on here?
It's been a traditional path of propaganda by Azerbaijan against Armenia and Artsakh. It's been coming in and out for the past 20 years. Previous big campaign was in 2007, 2008. Campaign as in publishing articles and making statements claiming that there is PKK presence in Karabakh. So this is over 12 years ago. And then it abruptly ended shortly after the Georgia war. They kind of gave up on the notion of Turkish assistance or something like that. So in this case, obviously, we have now a Turkish military presence in Azerbaijan. It's still at the token level, but it seems, it's going to be there in the foreseeable future. So they are presenting a new reality here, that there's a Turkish military presence, one, which serves as a deterrence for Armenian action, and also that they there is possible ground for Turkish military action against Armenian forces, and this is where this claims fit in. And we've heard that from Turkey during its operations in Syria that that they were fighting against PKK and ISIS at the same time. So potentially they could use that same argument in Armenia, where neither PKK nor ISIS has a presence.
So how is a squadron of Turkish fighters semi-permanently now in Azerbaijan compatible with Russia's foreign policy?
Well, I'm not sure if it is. I'm sure it's they're having, or Putin is having, some sort of deliberations about that. But in terms of actual reasons for this presence, I think that it's clear that this new acquisition of Armenia had, since they're more modern planes than anything that Azerbaijan has, these planes have come in to kind of, at the minimum level, to provide psychological comfort to Aliyev, that he has, sort of deterrence from potential bombing raid from Armenian planes, even though they do have supposed to have a sort of an elaborate air defense system, Israeli/Russian air defense system. But Aliyev has proven to be a very sensitive individual, so I'm sure he needed some additional layer of protection, which the Turkish forces are providing. If they start to kind of expand their presence and maybe take military action against Armenia, that certainly would raise this issue to a new level with Russia. And there was some rumors that reports that as part of the current exercises, the Russians are actually practicing sea landings in the Caspian. There are not that many countries to land into from the sea in the Caspian. So Russians are also sending their messages that that they're not really happy with this.
Just to give you small information about the Turkish military presence as well. Just the past couple of days, there have been military cargo jets flying from Turkey to Azerbaijan, like at least 4 flights, and also including from Ukraine. The military cargo jets are going back and forth a couple of times this just past week. So I think the military presence is already a reality in a way. It's not. It's a matter of time when it will show its actual presence during the combat.
Given the current situation, I was wondering what half a squadron of fighters in Baku would be good for fighting against Armenia. Are they protecting Aliyev's palace, basically, or?
Well, no, they're actually based in, as far as I understand, they're based in Ganja, closer to Armenia. So they're on alert for, say, Armenian Air Force, flying in. Hypothetically, that's what they're on.
Are they also in Nakhichevan?
Not F-16s. In Nakhichevan, they had a small special forces unit and a couple of helicopters. At least that's what been presented.
No, the past 4 years in Nakhichevan, they did expand the base there, and very extensive building of the infrastructures were happening as well. That's been closely monitored by our guys as well. And given also in 2018 May, they did advance in the Nakhichevan border area, so they do have eyes on Zangezur and also on Areni village area. So in that matter, they did make significant advancement for us to be relaxed in the Nakhichevan area as well. So,
do you have any thoughts about the war of disinformation, the fake news stream that's going on right now?
Actually, it's been there. I agree with Emil. It's been there for many years already. And time after time, we're actually getting better at combating it and also not buying it as such. And of course, now it's a more of a fertile zone for them because of the Armenia's internal policy and the country being in turbulence period as well. And but also it coincides with the fact that sometimes what Pashinyan government says and does do not actually fit each other. So there is a lot of room for also conspiracies. There is a lot of room for mistrust. and also seeing where in April 2016 the negotiations were left and where are they now. So these dynamics are a bit worrisome. So that's why I think their propaganda can succeed once or twice during this period. However, we're alert, and I was monitoring also the reaction from all the camps about this same 𝐀𝐬𝐻𝐾 article that was out there. And the notion was, yes, we do understand it's 𝐀𝐬𝐻𝐾, we don't buy it, but there is some explanation that needs to be done from the government side to actually understand whether it's there is room for worry or not. So, and because also unfortunately the statement that came even from Arsen, it was not about it wasn't very detailed, because the article itself was pretty detailed, if we're talking about the recent article of 𝐀𝐬𝐻𝐾, and the denial of it was a bit not as detailed as we would expect. So I think he should have denied it very, very detailed. So for us to eliminate all sorts of rumors and all sorts of rooms for misinterpretation whatsoever.
It's fascinating when we talk about war of disinformation or war of information or war of fakes. It's so many levels, and it seems that this is the norm these days, be that for internal politics or external politics, and also to sow discord among the other countries. A couple of days ago, I saw another fake news that with the official logo of on Twitter, I think, or the official logo of Nagorno-Karabakh self-declared government, saying people gather your stuff and move and so on and so forth. I mean, this is obviously it's fake, but it can create among the minds of people who can easily fall under these misinformation that, oh, war is coming, we should go away. Not to mention also so many other things about Turkey allegedly sending 1,000 troops to Azerbaijan from Syria and so on and so forth. I mean, it takes a creative minds to come up with these trolls to sit down and generate these news, but also it requires a lot of manpower and resources to actively combat them. So I think the ongoing war is a misinformation war at each other is an ongoing one, as the other two mentioned, Marina and Emil mentioned, but it has to be more, I mean, it's becoming the norm rather than an exception. So something to keep an eye on and to see, and more of a challenge for people to try to filter what is fake, what is correct.
Well, what is interesting about this, if I could say, what is interesting about this two stories, the Azerbaijanis talking about the Kurds coming to Armenia and the talk about Syrian Islamists coming to Azerbaijan. What's interesting is that the Syrian Islamist story is not fueled by Armenia. It's fueled originally by Kurdish sources and now endorsed by some of the Turkish opposition sources and now endorsed by some Russian sources, but not by Armenia. I really haven't seen it, spun by Armenian sources that much. So that's in the case of the Kurdish story. It's pretty clear it's coming from Azerbaijani KGB or Foreign Intelligence Service.
No, they did try also do similar things like videos and a guy speaking in Armenian saying, "Oh my God, they're killing us" and stuff like that. But it's done in such a bad quality that really is easy to just not pay attention, because from Armenian language itself, like it's very easy to detect. So in a way, our language is kind of protecting us. So it's for people are like they learning how to identify Azeri propaganda during the wars and stuff.
All right. Thank you, everyone. Hovig, you wanted to talk about the domestic scene. There's a rally in preparation in October.
Yes. So the trio of opposition parties, they are known as a trio, which is 𝐵արգավաճ Հայաստան, BHK, Armenian Revolutionary Federation, and the Hayrenik Party, the party set up by Vanetsyan, announced that they will hold a rally in Freedom Square on October 8th and said that their goal was to call for snap elections in Armenia. Now, Bright Armenia's leader, the other parliamentary opposition party, the leader of that party, Edmond Marukyan, said that they will not join the rally. And in fact, they also said that they were not invited to begin with. They're in favor of change, though, but not through elections. For instance, last week they held hearings for 𝐼𝐸, to try to denounce 𝐼𝐸 Harutyunyan and so forth. So something's going on in parallel. On Friday, a Yerevan court authorized the arrest of 𝐵արգավաճ Հայաստան leader Gagik Tsarukyan on vote-buying charges. This is major, and obviously Tsarukyan denies publicly any wrongdoing and says that all charges are politically motivated. because he called on Pashinyan to resign. Now, it's interesting that his call for Pashinyan's resignation, or the entire leadership's resignation, was in June, shortly before this case against him was opened. And there are now trades of accusation back and forth between the government and Tsarukyan that, on who started this first. So the government camp accuses Tsarukyan of starting these calls for resignation in reaction to the criminal case to sort of paint himself as a political opposition. Meanwhile, the opposition says that the government started the criminal case in response to the call for resignation. So what is the truth here? Do we have any objective information? And also, in reality, these three parties, the opposition parties, seem to be quite divergent ideologically. There is one concept that's uniting them today, which is the resignation of the government. But Aspet, Kochikian, maybe we can start with you. Is there a longer-term cooperation that we can see between these parties and a more unified Armenian opposition?
Yeah, to paraphrase Tina Turner's song, what does ideology have to do with it in terms of Armenian political parties? I think it's a matter of coalition and cooperation, not strategic, but tactical cooperation, taking advantage of what's happening in Armenia now with the growing discontent with the current government. And I think this is one of the key things in terms of demonstrations and protests in Armenia, right? Going back to 2008, those people who took on the streets were not all supporters of the leader at the time of the protest, Levon Debedros. There were so many different groups who coalesced around him. The same thing in 2018. It wasn't just one person, supporters of civil contract and so on and so forth. So probably I think the approach that they have now, the three parties, one parliamentary opposition and the two extra parliamentary groups, is to also to develop or to build upon that discontent. Because at the end of the day, it's about the street politics, right? This is something that in the Middle East, they used to talk about a lot, the Arab street, because you couldn't gauge, you couldn't measure opposition in any other way, but how many people are taking on the street. So I think there will be a large number of people gathering. I'm not sure it's going to be quite large. It also depends on how the government is going to react to it in terms of putting restrictions on them. So this would be a very good litmus test to see, how far they have gone from their promises. But it is a tactical one. And I think, so from the perspective of the 𝐊𝐵𝐺𝐻, probably Tsarukyan's warrant or arrest warrant, I think, has something to do with this. And I feel if one looks over the last couple of months in terms of how tension escalated between 𝐊𝐵𝐺𝐻 and the ruling party, already Tsarukyan started situating himself as an opposition and trying to explain everything that's going against him as a political persecution rather than what the ruling party claims to be a fight against corruption and so on and so forth. So it will be good to see what's going to happen after the event, how many people will gather. And I think Tsarukyan himself is able to bring in a lot of people, like he did probably, according to some sources, during the 2018 demonstrations when he aligned himself with Pashinyan. And I think in this perspective, the ARF, the Dashnak Party, is trying to offer an ideological overtone. But they do also have a level of sort of jealousy as to the claim that they're a revolutionary party, yet they've been sidelined and being blamed as being anti-revolutionary. And whereas in the case of 𝐻𝐸𝐿 Vanetzian, I think it gives them the overall protection or the overall legitimacy that, look, even people who used to be in the government now are against them.
Marine, what can we expect to see between now and October 8th and on the day of October 8th? Do you agree with Aspet's thoughts here? And specifically, I'm interested to see what the Pashinyan administration's response is going to be. I'm worried that the COVID numbers are going to rise in Armenia, and I'm wondering if that is going to be used as an excuse or to disrupt traffic and prevent this rally from happening or limit its size. It opens up some interesting areas to think about.
Well, current situation with the inner politics of Armenia is pretty the picture is very scattered, and we're in the process of groups being formed, new coalitions being built. So it's like, it's still being in the process in a way. But I can say the following, that the government is not very happy with any protests that are out there. And it's not just because COVID-19. It is actually a big fear because economically we're doing bad and it's going to be even worse. So they are being very, and in the general public that went after Nikol Pashinyan and after the 2018 events, it was generated by different groups, and it was not genuine one crowd with one ideology and one expectation. No, it was triggers were coming from the right and left. So Tsarukyan is actually holding a very big piece of cake of that, the crowd in a way. So he is probably the most dangerous candidate to challenge the sitting government today. As ironic as might sound, probably I don't like this government for one reason, very important reason, which is making me kind of, coincide with those who I used to not like very much back in the day. So the rallies will bring out a lot of people, and of course, I'm not naive. This court decision and everything is not done just because of the accusations and the criminal charges against Tsarukyan is absolutely and purely political. And if you look into the charges, even there is no way they can tie up the bribery or vote buying up to Tsarukyan. I mean, he can literally very easily escape from the criminal charges. And hence, I don't think that this is going to be successful. He's going to come out in 2 months, or he's going to pay up and then come out in 2 months. So it depends how much, it depends what is on their agenda, plan A, plan B, plan C. So
if that is the case, then isn't the Pashinyan administration helping Tsarukyan gain more legitimacy and amplifying his voice rather than, trying to prevent the protests?
It's either the situation is so tense that the only way out is to detain him, or it's actually making him to be a viable opposition and artificially create this, gravity center for opposition forces, thus preventing the others from the chance of unifying. That this could also be one of the, ways of the government logic and understanding, because on the other camp, you have the Republicans, you have the adekvats, you have Mikhail Minasyan, you have, all those who have certain institutional capacity, pretty good professional team that can still, the second young generation of the Republicans who can actually be good drivers for this government as well. So, not the odious, characters such as the previous oligarchs and criminals, but the other ones, the white collar ones. So this could be also a way to make Tsarukyan the center of gravity for the opposition nowadays. That's why it's a very interesting process going on. But I do believe that from the way the decisions are made and from the way and the timing of the detention and everything, it's obvious that there is some certain level of, I don't want to say the regime is in panic whatsoever. That's already a joke in our reality, but the system does have certain worrisome, sending of worrying signals in a way. So.
Yeah, in a couple of weeks, I think to add on that, it would be interesting to see if the Republican Party and its machine is going to support this or not indirectly, if in terms of supporting people or encouraging people to go there, because probably
so far there were no signs of it.
Yeah, I think the Tsarukyan people want to keep their distance too. Yeah.
Well, they can keep their distance. I mean, they do not participate directly. They can keep their distance as then saying that, listen, we're not part of it. So we're actually the good guys. You can come back to us. But at the same time, they have also learned that, 2.5 years ago, that people on the street do matter. The number of the people in the street does matter. That can shape public policy or policy in general and create a mood. So I think it has become a sort of catch-as-catch-can situation where the more people you can gather in a rally, the more legitimacy you have, using the words of the Prime Minister himself, right? So it's interesting coalescing and sort of precipitation of the opposition field in Armenia, both parliamentary and extra-parliamentary.
I think we will also observe police brutality in the streets for the October 8th for sure, and that will be the COVID excuse. Police will be present and police will be policing very hardcore, I think.
Emil, you wanted to mention something?
This arrest of Robert Kocherian and Tsarukyan and other people, the main point of them is to show that Nikol Pashinyan is in charge, that the court system obeys him, that the government obeys him. And it's still an important mechanism for him to show that he is in charge, so he will probably continue doing that. And the side issue is that the point of the arrest is to squeeze some money out of Tsarukyan into the government, and there is general notion that he owes the government some money for all the years of avoiding paying taxes. He probably thinks that he has given out as gifts enough. It's like a constant issue between businessmen and in the government. But one interesting thing about Ǩoçaryan is that he refused to pay any money to the government, right? That's probably why he was in prison longer than most people. And eventually the government appears to have settled for sort of the Russian businessman paying that bail money instead of Ǩoçaryan himself.
That doesn't make sense,
money.
Emil, to me at least. The bail money is not, doesn't go to the budget. They cannot use that money for budgetary purposes.
He can say he got something, because Ǩoçaryan was refusing to pay anything.
It's more for PR.
Yeah. Of course.
No, but up until now, we have no idea where does this money go after all. Like, where does the Gagik Khachatryan money went that he did pay about 200 million? Nobody knows where is this money going. Some are being paid to the Anna Hakopian's foundations. Some are being paid and used by the civil contract expenses. Nobody knows where does this money actually go. There is no transparency when it comes to that. And even Pashinyan himself said, there is some money that we actually use for some needs we have, and there is some money that goes to the budget, and there is this, and there is that. So, literally no transparency there as well. So
yeah, I agree. It's a major problem.
Okay, we are going to keep watching this topic, and we're going to come back to it the weekend after the rally. Thank you, everyone.
thank you.
And that concludes our program for this episode of Groong Week in Review. We hope it has helped your understanding of some of the issues from this previous week. We look forward to your feedback and suggestions for issues to cover in greater depth. Contact us on our website at groong.org, that's GROONG, and on our Facebook page, ANN-Groong, or in our Facebook group, Groong-Armenian News Network. Special thanks to Laura Osborne for providing the music for our podcast. I'm 𝐊𝐫𝐨𝐨𝐧𝐞 𝐿, and on behalf of everyone in this episode, I wish you a good week. Thank you for listening, and talk to you next week.